the video that is the first time detectives learned that there was actually 4 people in that gray Jeep, and that the defendant, Jamel Demons, is in the rear driver's side seat.
New footage just dropped, and it is about to flip the entire YNW Melly murder case upside down for the very first time. We're finally seeing what really went down that night between Bortlin and Melly, and the details are even darker than anyone imagined. But here is the shocking twist. Someone close decided to turn on his own homie once they hit that dead end, leaving fans speechless about where the loyalty truly stood. Let's break down the night that changed everything forever. 2 best friends were brutally murdered on October 26, 2018, a night that started off like any other in the trap. Young hustlers grinding in the studio, chasing fame, dodging demons, and trying to outrun the streets. But by sunrise, 2 young kings would be laid out cold, lifeless, and their supposed day one brother would be cuffed up in county facing double murder charges. This is the true, twisted story of how money, fame, jealousy, and street politics transformed brotherhood into pure bloodshed in one of hip-hop's coldest betrayals ever. The YNW crew had been tight since childhood, running wild through Gifford, Florida, a hood so ruthless, you either escape or get buried in it trying. YNW Melly. Jamel Demons, better known as YNW Melly, was blowing up fast with his haunting banger Murder on My Mind, and the streets were locked in heavy on him. But with all that sudden success came shadows. Tension was growing inside his own camp. The very brothers he came up with. YNW Sack Chaser, real name Anthony Williams, just 21, and YNW Juvie, Christopher Thomas Jr., only 19, had been riding with Melly since they were kids running through the dirt roads of Gifford. They had survived the same poverty, shared the same hunger, and dreamed the same escape. But as Melly's star started climbing, the brotherhood began to crumble under the weight of money. The beef had been brewing quietly for months, and it all boiled down to one thing: paper. When Melly signed to 300 Entertainment in July 2018, snagging a deal rumored between $200,000 and $500,000, his day ones felt frozen out in the cold, with nothing to show for their loyalty.
The surveillance cameras caught what looked like just another night with the squad.
The vibes look decent. I'm going to be honest with you. It don't look like nobody kind of beefing. Nobody look too excited. You know, if somebody kind of got into it, like, they might be like, they're not just walking normal. Like, everybody looks kind of chill.
Feds would later uncover damning text messages where Sack Chaser pressed Melly directly, writing, "You blowing up. We still eating crumbs. Pay up or we done." In Gifford, loyalty wasn't just a word. It was survival. Betrayal? That could get you smoked in broad daylight without hesitation.
This is Sack Chaser. Where does he get in? Good. Remember they said it was a gray vehicle. He gets into, this is Juvie, I said, right? He gets into the front right side.
The YNW collective was born in this unforgiving environment, forged from blood, struggle, and the desperate dream of breaking free.
Melly comes, and Melly goes to the back passenger. Yeah.
But cracks were spreading faster than anyone realized. They had weathered the worst together, sleeping on floors, watching close friends get gunned down in the streets, and holding each other up through the endless grind of chasing a rap dream.
He even shot through the seat multiple times, and there was no defense wounds to be like, stop. You get me? It was that quick. Bang, 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 bang. That quick.
For years, the crew moved as one, a tight unit where success for a single brother was supposed to mean success for them all. But the music industry has a cruel way of twisting that dream, turning brotherhood into competition and loyalty into resentment. Melly's rapid rise was no ordinary glow-up. It was a rocket. His breakout track had already made noise, but once he locked in with Kanye West on Mixed Personalities, he was thrust into a completely different world. That feature opened doors to studios and stages that his childhood friends could never step into, no matter how deep their bond once was. Fame had shifted the entire balance, and suddenly the gap between Melly and his day ones looked wider than ever before. The chains, the foreign cars, The high-profile collabs, all of it stood in painful contrast to the real struggles his homies were still drowning in back in Gifford. And to make things worse, street politics weren't letting up either. As members of the YNW-affiliated Bloods, known locally as the Gifford Slimes, the crew lived by a strict hierarchy where respect, money, and survival were tied to what you brought to the table.
To stage the shooting because they believe people were already dead, they hopped out the car and then they shot up the car afterwards, and they believe those bullet casings they found at that spot was a .40 caliber.
But Melly's rise meant he was at the top of that pyramid, while his brothers were left at the bottom feeling powerless. Melly's sudden solo rise wasn't just disrupting his crew. It was shaking the entire street hierarchy.
And Mr. Demmons responds very succinctly, I did that.
His individual success began tearing at the old power structures, creating deep resentment, not only inside his inner circle, but across the broader gang network too. The pressure of balancing loyalty to his childhood brothers and loyalty to the set was becoming impossible to juggle. And on that fatal night, it would all explode into bloodshed. The crew had been posted up at New Era recording studios, laying down new tracks, moving like it was just another late session. Surveillance cameras showed nothing unusual on the surface, just 4 homies laughing, smoking, and getting ready to leave. But real street veterans know the truth. Still waters run deep. Behind that calm composure, something deadly was simmering, and the night was about to turn historic for all the wrong reasons. At exactly 4:08 a.m., cameras caught all 4 sliding out together and piling into a rented gray Jeep Compass. That seating arrangement, who sat where, would later become the smoking gun that prosecutors built their entire case around. Sack Chaser unknowingly climbed into what the streets call the death seat, right up front in the passenger spot, while Juvie hopped in beside him.
And they sit and they walk side by side for an hour, that mile-long stretch, looking for evidence of this drive-by. Because evidence is the remnants a crime leaves behind. And in this case, the lack of evidence is very important.
Melly, cool and silent, slid into the back left seat, directly behind the driver. Prosecutors would later label that spot the perfect execution position, where he could line up both of his so-called brothers without warning. As they rolled through the dark backroads near Miramar Parkway between 4:10 and 4:20 a.m., the district attorney claims Melly unleashed hellfire from his corner, shots ripping out in seconds. It happened so fast his homies never stood a chance to process what was even happening. Sack Chaser was hit 8 times, with fatal blasts tearing through his head, neck, and chest. Juvie caught 4 rounds of his own, each strike devastating enough to make survival impossible. In just moments, a brotherhood turned into a massacre inside that gray Jeep, leaving nothing but silence and smoke. The autopsy findings tore through the courtroom like a bombshell. Forensic examiners revealed stippling, burnt and unburnt gunpowder tattooed into the victim's wounds, proving the shots came from point-blank range. No defensive wounds, no signs of resistance, nothing but silence. That meant both Sack Chaser and Juvie never even knew what hit them. They were probably sitting there thinking they were just riding home with their brother, right up until the very last breath. The medical examiner's breakdown was chilling. Sack Chaser A.S. fatal headshot ripped in from the back of his skull and blasted out through the top with so much force it shattered the front passenger window into pieces. Juvie's death was no less brutal. Shot in the left cheek at close range, the bullet carving straight through as if he had been looking forward the entire time, never once turning to see the danger creeping from behind. The wound trajectories painted a picture of pure execution. No warning, no struggle, just calculated slaughter. And here's where it got even darker.
In the video, that is the first time detectives learned that there was actually 4 people in that gray Jeep. And that the defendant, Jamel Demmons, is in the rear driver's side seat.
The choice of location, a back road, secluded, no cameras, no witnesses, screamed premeditation. This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was mapped out, cold, strategic killing. Multiple rounds fired into both victims, even after they were already lifeless, showed the shooter wasn't just ending lives. He was staging a scene. Forensics later revealed extra bullets fired through the seats long after death, a chilling sign that the cover-up began immediately. Investigators were floored. This wasn't sloppy street violence. This was methodical, step-by-step execution and staging. According to prosecutors, the killers even drove the bodies to a remote spot after the massacre. And that is when the most cold-blooded move came into play. They hopped out and lit the Jeep up from the outside with a different gun, making it appear like a random drive-by ambush had taken place. This wasn't rage. This wasn't spur of the moment.
Because at that location is where the cell phones of Christopher Thomas, Anthony Williams, and Jamel Demmons all line up at 4:02 a.m. That point, afterwards, Mr. Demmons' phone tracks with the two victims until about 4:20.
The DA called it what it was: stone-cold killer behavior, the kind of plot that showed every detail had been thought through in advance, from the ambush to the cleanup. The Brotherhood was dead, and in its place stood a crime scene dressed up like theater, designed to fool the world into thinking it was all just another night of street violence gone wrong. At 4:35 a.m., YNW Bortland pulled up to Memorial Hospital Miramar with two dead bodies still slumped inside the Jeep. And the wildest part? Homie was cool as ice when he walked in, calmly telling doctors and cops the story. They had just been victims of a random drive-by shooting. No panic, no sweat, just a script rehearsed to perfection. But where was Melly? Ghost. Prosecutors say he had already been scooped from wherever they staged the fake ambush, leaving Bortland to play cleanup man, dropping the bodies, pushing the lie, and selling the cover story like it was gospel. The DA's smoking gun didn't even come from the streets. It came straight off social media. After word of the murders started spreading, Melly's phone lit up with messages. Everyone wanted to know if he was good. And when one close homie asked what really happened, prosecutors claim Melly's response was two words that cut colder than ice. I did that.
Why is that important? That shows a gun was fired inside of that car.
To the DA, those weren't just words. They were a flat-out confession. The motive? A toxic cocktail of money, jealousy, and gang politics. The same poison that's destroyed more crews than the feds ever could. Melly's fast come-up had sparked serious paper issues, with his success threatening the delicate power structure of the YNW Bloods, also known in Gifford as the Slimes. And when loyalty and bread clash in the hood, history shows only one outcome. Somebody ends up in a casket. What made this case especially twisted was just how close they really were. Melly wasn't beefing with outsiders. He had literally tattooed Sack Chaser and Juvie's names on his face while they were still alive. He had shown the world these were his ride-or-die brothers, the ones who had shared floors, food, and dreams with him. These weren't random ops. These were childhood friends who wanted to escape the gutter together. But the bodies weren't even cold when detectives started piecing the truth together. This wasn't a drive-by gone wrong. It was an inside job wrapped in betrayal.
Was staged at 4:02 a.m. The victims were...
And as evidence piled up, the cover-up began to unravel, exposing a scheme that was darker and colder than anything the hood had seen in years. The cover-up was elaborate, so elaborate it almost worked. It showed just how far someone could go to erase the very people who knew them best. What started off looking like just another routine hood shooting quickly flipped into one of the most complex forensic cases the state had ever seen. The evidence uncovered pointed not to chaos, but to a chilling level of planning, a criminal mastermind cover story so layered it nearly fooled the entire system. When Miramar PD rolled into the hospital lot, they immediately locked down the Jeep and started pressing Bortland for answers. His version of events was straight textbook street lingo. They were riding back from the studio when an unknown car pulled up and sprayed the whip with bullets. A classic drive-by. He stuck to it cool as ever, selling the story like he believed it himself. But when detectives went to fact-check the account, things got suspicious quick. They shut down a mile-long stretch of Miramar Parkway from 160th to 172nd Street and walked it inch by inch for over an hour, expecting to find at least some trace of the so-called ambush. Nothing, no casings, no shards of glass, no stray bullets, no tire marks. Not a single clue. Investigators weren't buying it.
YNW Borland, he could took the deal. Where did I leave Melly though, brother? Where did I leave YNW Melly and the case?
To make sure, they expanded the search another mile in both directions, combing through every inch of road and shoulder. Same result, absolutely nothing. And that made zero sense, because the Jeep they seized was Swiss cheese, riddled with 16 bullet holes, a shattered rear window, and both side windows blown out. If Bortland's story was legit, the scene should have been littered with evidence.
1 and 2 is murder in the first degree with a firearm. Those are capital offenses. The maximum and mandatory penalty is life in Florida State Prison. Counts 3 and 4 are accessory after the fact to murder in the first degree. Those are each first degree felonies. The maximum penalty is 30 years in Florida State Prison.
Cops knew the truth right then. Drive-bys always leave trails. Casings from the shooter's guns scattered everywhere, glass fragments from the windows littering the asphalt, bullet marks in nearby walls or cars, even skid marks from the getaway ride peeling off. But here, nothing but silence. The whole setup was falling apart under the weight of cold, hard forensics.
Now, I know some of y'all are super thugged out in here. A life sentence. What? But when he was only facing 30 years, he was like, They added the murder charges afterwards to make that nigga know. Oh, you think we only want Melly? We'll fry you too. I think that made him think a little bit different.
For investigators who'd worked hundreds of similar shootings, the scene made zero sense. The complete lack of physical evidence wasn't just odd, it was a screaming red flag.
In exchange for that, I'm going to adjudicate you guilty on the 2 accessory counts as well as the tampering count. I'm going to sentence you to 10 years in Florida State Prison. That will be followed by 6 years of reporting probation.
What made it even more suspicious was the condition of the Jeep itself. The SUV was riddled with 16 bullet holes, multiple windows blown out, and metal torn up by heavy gunfire. With that kind of destruction, the crime scene should have been a goldmine of evidence.
I guess at some point after the fact, the state wants to take a proffer from you or have a discussion with you, ask you some questions about whatever that may be.
The sheer volume of rounds meant something had to be left behind. Casings, glass, ricochet marks, even bullets lodged in guardrails or embedded in trees along the roadside. Yet the highway stretch Bortland pointed to was squeaky clean. Nothing. Not a single casing, not a shard of glass, not a bullet impact. And then came the bombshell.
When pleading to an accessory to murder after the fact, you have to acknowledge that the murder happened and you assisted someone or in some way to cover the murder.
When crime scene techs studied the supposed shooting location, the glass pattern didn't match a drive-by at all. During moving vehicle shootouts, glass scatters in distinct angles depending on speed and direction. Here, there were no fragments at all. That meant those windows were blasted somewhere else entirely. The real breakthrough came when detectives decided to retrace the crew's steps, working backwards like old-school homicide cops. Their trail led straight to New Era recording studios, a building wired with cameras everywhere. And what those cameras revealed flipped the case upside down. First off, Bortland's story didn't line up. He never once mentioned Melly was in the Jeep. But the studio footage proved otherwise. Melly was right there with them the whole time. Which left detectives asking, if this was a real ambush, how did Melly walk away untouched while his 2 best friends ended up dead? Unless, of course, he wasn't a victim at all.
Y'all know Melly didn't kill his 2 best friends. Like, come on. Like, we go through this every time with us, culture, being black, artists. Y'all know we target.
Then came the inconsistencies. The timestamp on the footage showed the crew leaving the studio at 3:19 a.m., not the earlier time Bortland had tried to sell. Even more damning?
Melly looks defeated, man. It's been 7 years, bro. It's been 7 years. He looks defeated, bro. He looks defeated.
The cameras showed all four leaving calm, laughing, casual, with no hint of fear or tension. No one was watching their back, no one looking over their shoulder, nothing to suggest they thought an ambush was waiting outside. Inside cameras told the same story. Hours of footage showing them locked in the booth, making music, trading jokes, and vibing like brothers. There was no visible beef, no arguments, no fights, no tension that would hint at violence brewing. To cops, it was clear. Whatever went down that night wasn't spontaneous. It was staged, planned, and executed with chilling precision. This new wave of evidence became absolutely crucial in shutting down any claims that the murders were the result of a spontaneous beef or sudden argument. What made it especially devastating for Bortland's credibility was his massive omission. He forgot to mention Melly was even in the Jeep during those first interviews with police. And let's be real, that wasn't some small detail slipping through the cracks. That was a fundamental lie, a deliberate deception that told detectives something bigger. If Bortland was lying about who was in the car, then he was probably lying about everything else that night. That's when the investigation went next level, straight into high-tech forensic territory. Cops pulled digital receipts, and the cell phone data was like a window into the crime itself. The digital footprint these dudes left behind turned out to be more damaging than any eyewitness ever could. Cell tower records revealed all three phones, Melly's, Sack Chaser's, and Juvie's, pinged at the exact same remote location near US 27 and Pembroke Road at 4:02 a.m. That was right when prosecutors say the murders went down. The phones stayed there for 18 minutes, until 4:20 a.m., before splitting off. One phone made its way toward the hospital with the bodies, while the others peeled off in a different direction, like pieces of a puzzle being moved around. The data painted a chilling minute-by-minute reconstruction of that night. It showed the convoy rolling across Interstate 595 together before breaking off at Miramar Parkway and 184th Street. One vehicle pushed toward the Sunset Lakes gated community where associates stayed, while the other veered north into increasingly remote backroads, the very type of spot where cops now believed the setup and cover-up played out. And then came the kicker. The digital evidence revealed a level of sophistication nobody expected. Melly and Sack Chaser were rocking the exact same make and model of phone, both under the same service plan. That allowed investigators to track their movements in parallel with surgical precision. Every step, every ping, every detour laid bare in cold data that couldn't be faked, couldn't be denied, and couldn't be explained away in court. The cell data showed it plain as day, both phones traveling together straight to that remote location where prosecutors say the murders went down. They lingered there during the critical time window, then split off, with one heading back toward the city while the other pushed onto the hospital. But this wasn't just about maps and locations. The phones carried even deeper secrets. Melly's device betrayed him. The health app recorded his every move, literally. At the studio earlier that night, his phone logged 70 steps, but at 4:02 a.m., the exact time the murders allegedly happened, another 70 steps appeared, proving movement when he was supposed to be sitting in the Jeep. Then came the real bombshell. Between 4:42 and 4:53 a.m., his phone tracked a staggering 1,397 steps. That digital footprint screamed that Melly had been on foot, moving heavy, right when prosecutors believe he was arranging to get scooped up from the crime scene after the staged shooting. Then came the ballistics, and it painted an even clearer picture than the phones. Investigators recovered spent shell casings inside the Jeep itself, proving beyond question that the fatal shots came from within the vehicle, shattering the drive-by story completely. And when cops searched the remote site, flagged by the phone data, they found even more, 8 additional shell casings from a .40 caliber weapon. The forensic breakdown showed 2 distinct shooting events, the internal blasts that killed Sack Chaser and Juvie, and the staged external shots fired afterward to sell the drive-by fantasy. The ballistics experts noted that the casings inside the Jeep were from a different caliber than those recovered at the remote location. Proof multiple weapons were used, and proof the killers planned ahead with enough sophistication to try confusing the evidence trail. But the real nail in the coffin was the bullet trajectory analysis. Every angle, every entry point confirmed the same truth. The fatal shots had been fired from inside the car, from the rear left passenger seat. And that just happened to be the exact spot where studio surveillance cameras had already caught Melly sitting. The paths showed the rounds slicing diagonally, tearing through the front passenger seat where Sack Chaser sat, and the rear right passenger side where Juvie was trapped. The science left no room for doubt. It was an execution from inside, and Melly's position fitted perfectly. The precision of the fatal shots, combined with the complete absence of defensive wounds, made one fact undeniable. The shooter had total surprise and was right on top of his targets. The ballistics revealed even more. The so-called staging shots, fired at the remote location, were carefully aimed to mimic a drive-by. The bullet holes were concentrated on the passenger side of the Jeep, as if an outside car had pulled up spraying. But the science didn't lie. The angles and entry points didn't match gunfire from a moving vehicle at all. Instead, they lined up perfectly with shots fired by someone standing still outside the car, shots staged after the fact to sell a fake narrative. And the autopsy made it even darker. The medical examiner confirmed the external wounds happened after death. That meant the Jeep and the bodies inside were shot up post-mortem, all to create the illusion of a drive-by ambush. Cold, calculated, and chilling. Investigators dug deeper, and digital communications exposed the cover-up in real time. Prosecutors say Melly FaceTimed his girl while at the staging site, already weaving an alibi before the bodies were even cold. He sent out location pins, hitting up associates for a ride out of the remote area. Technology was catching him in lies he thought would disappear in smoke. Still, when it hit trial in 2023, the case stalled. The jury split, 8 for guilty, 4 for not guilty. The missing murder weapon, messy questions about motive, and accusations of sloppy police work cracked open enough reasonable doubt to block a conviction. For a moment, it looked like Melly and Bortlen might actually skate on double murder charges that had the hip-hop world watching like a movie. But loyalty in the hood has a breaking point, and prison time will test it every time. For years, both Melly and Bortlen stood united, silent, claiming they were victims of real street violence. Yet when life sentences hang over your head, silence turns heavy, and after 6 long years of fighting the case side by side, cracks began to form. The same loyalty that once kept them bonded was about to crumble under the weight of survival instincts, proving one harsh truth. When the pressure gets real, self-preservation always beats street code. The ultimate betrayal, when loyalty breaks. September 9th, 2025, marked the day loyalty officially died in the YNW case. Just hours before his own trial was set to begin, YNW Bortlen made the move that would brand him a rat forever. He took a plea deal that could send his childhood homie Melly straight to death row. For 6 years, Bortlen had been solid, silent, sticking to their script about being victims of a drive-by. But staring down multiple life sentences with jury selection the next morning, even the hardest street soldiers start asking if loyalty is worth dying in a cage. The timing was explosive. His lawyers had prepped for war, jurors were already summoned, and suddenly everything flipped. The charges stacked against him painted a young man cornered by a system designed to crush loyalty. Prosecutors had been playing chess, while Bortlen played checkers, loading on charges until he was staring at 5 potential life sentences, plus 75 extra years. What began as accessory charges had now ballooned into 2 first-degree murder counts, witness tampering, and gang activity. The progression revealed the prosecution's ruthless brilliance. Initially, Bortlen faced manageable prison time that could have been survived. But as their case against Melly wavered, they strategically escalated Bortlen's charges, tightening the noose until cooperation became his only lifeline. The murder charges were the game changer, the quantum leap that shifted Bortlen's entire legal nightmare. In Florida, first-degree murder isn't negotiable. It carries a mandatory life sentence with 0 parole. No judge has wiggle room, no second chances. For a young man who'd already spent years rotting in jail awaiting trial, the thought of never breathing free air again became the ultimate motivator to rethink loyalty. On top of that, the witness tampering and gang activity charges stacked even more weight onto his shoulders. Those counts suggested prosecutors believed Bortlin didn't just cover for Melly. He actively obstructed the investigation and did it as part of organized crime. Each charge carried the possibility of life. That meant prosecutors had multiple shots at locking him away forever. No parole, no deals. The DA's strategy was pure psychological warfare. They steadily cranked up the heat, transforming Bortlin from a man facing maybe a few decades to someone staring down multiple mandatory life sentences. It was systematic pressure designed to shatter resolve, and eventually, it worked. Under the plea deal, Bortlin dodged the murder charges completely. He pled guilty to 2 counts of accessory after the fact to murder, 1 count of witness tampering in a capital case, and 1 count of unlawful use of a communication device. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the 2 murder counts, the ones that would guaranteed him either the needle or a life bid. But here's the catch. The real price wasn't the lighter sentence. It was what he had to trade for it. The judge made it crystal clear. Cooperation was the condition. Snitching wasn't optional. It was mandatory. That meant Bortlin had to sit down and give a proffer, a sworn statement spilling everything he knew. That proffer is the deadliest piece for Melly, because in black and white, Bortlin legally admitted murders occurred and admitted he played a role in covering them up. The cover-up was no longer rumor, no longer speculation. It was fact. And with his sworn words on record, the spotlight turned squarely onto Melly as the man prosecutors claim pulled the trigger. Bortlin's admission blew a hole straight through the defense. By acknowledging the murders weren't from a drive-by, he killed one of Melly's main arguments. His DNA plea confirmed he was in the Jeep that night, giving prosecutors another weapon to use in court. The math behind his decision was brutal but simple. With time served, good behavior credits, and a structured sentence, Bortlin could potentially see freedom in as little as 3 to 5 years. Compared to life without parole, or even the death penalty, that's no choice at all. The proffer requirement wasn't just cooperation, it was the total dismantling of Melly's defense. Under a Queen for a Day session, Bortlin had to answer every question about October 26, 2018. If he lied, the deal vanished, and the murder charges came back. That gave him every incentive to be brutally honest, no matter what it cost Melly. Prosecutors were confident. His testimony wouldn't just be words, it carried the weight of a sworn statement, backed by the threat of losing his plea deal. That made his account legally strong and nearly impossible to shake in court. For years, the 2 men had stood shoulder to shoulder, silent against the charges, but the pressure of dying behind bars broke that bond. Street code says you never fold, yet when life sentences are on the table, self-preservation always wins. For Melly, locked down since February 2019, this was the ultimate betrayal. His retrial, scheduled for January 2027, will now feature Bortlin's cooperation, the inside knowledge prosecutors have been waiting on. It's the kind of testimony that could decide between acquittal and death row. Melly's team continues to call him innocent, accusing prosecutors of railroading a black artist just to secure a conviction. They argue the system targeted him from day one, forcing his brother to flip under unbearable pressure. But the stark reality remains. Bortlin chose family, freedom, and a second chance at life over loyalty to a childhood friend. The years behind bars have taken a visible toll on both men. When Melly appeared in court for a bond hearing, the weight of incarceration showed clear on his face. And now, with his day one homie turned state witness, the fight for his life has never been more desperate. The psychological toll of Melly's incarceration cannot be ignored. He spent more than 6 years locked down, much of it in solitary confinement or under harsh restrictions. Experts say this kind of isolation grinds a man down, slowly eroding his mind, body, and spirit. Facing the possibility of execution day after day has left visible marks on his appearance, his health, and his demeanor in court. Legal analysts argue that these extreme conditions are already a punishment of their own, long before a final conviction has even been reached. Now, With Bortland flipping and his retrial looming in January 2027, Melly's fate is more uncertain than ever. Will the state finally secure the conviction they've been chasing for years? Or will Melly's team find a way to fight back against the betrayal? One thing is for sure. This saga has become one of hip-hop's darkest and most shocking murder cases, and the next chapter could decide everything. Thanks for watching. If you're locked in, keep the story alive by clicking one of the videos on your screen right now for more unbelievable content.